everyone. Welcome to this Facebook Live about chores and family work. I think it's something we're probably all thinking a lot about lately. And so one of my friends texted me and asked if I had any suggestions about chore systems. And I said, I do, but I don't think I can send them through text. I'll send you an email or I'll do a blog post. And she said, yeah, do a blog post because I think a lot of people are thinking about this right now. So I wrote some things out and decided to do a Facebook Live about it as well and get some of your thoughts and ideas and questions as we go through this topic. So my name's Karen Bates and I am the author of Find Your Path, Learn Your Part in the Fight for Good, and the owner of Warrior Education, A Warrior Education, and I'm most importantly the mother of 8, and I've been doing these Facebook Lives to kind of connect as we're all kind of separated right now, to think about some of the things we're thinking about and discussing some of the things that are on our minds, and especially about parenting in our family. So this is, like I said, the topic for today is family work. Last time we talked about helping a child deal with anxiety. And the time before that, we talked about helping a child who didn't want to change, but can like to change, try to change everybody else. And next week, we'll be talking about helping a child who's being defiant and how to help your family also help them, because a lot of times they're very difficult to deal with for everybody. And so you can tune in for that. I wanted to also let you know, as we're getting started and waiting for people, about my family program that I just finished. It's part 1. There's going to be 3 parts in it, but part 1 deals with the first book that just came out. And it has some strategy planners that go with it, so your family can journal together and work through the program together as a family, so everybody feels united in a common cause. They learn to serve and love one another as they're working to use their gifts and talents for good in the world. So that's something you're interested in, you can come to the website at warrioreducation.com, look on family program on the top menu, and you can read about it there. So we'll get into this topic. I should start with a disclaimer. I don't have a perfectly clean house. So when we're talking about family work and family systems, I think, just to get it out there, I'm not perfect at it. I'm okay with just having our house. We clean it every morning, and we usually clean it either after dinner or before dinner in the evening, not always if things are really busy. And I try to make sure the kids clean up after themselves through the day, but I'm not always successful, so it's not always clean. But I have studied this a lot. I used to write about this a lot. I was looking in my blog from like 12 years ago, and I had a series of posts about family work, and it was something that I was really working on figuring out back then, and I've kind of worked through it a lot, and so hopefully some of my ideas will help. And it was good for me to go back through those posts because I looked at something, so I'm like, oh yeah, that was a really great idea, I should try that again. So this has been a good one for me to think about lately, as I haven't been as focused on it. So let's start I always like to start a lot of these things with, oh, Jamie, hi. It's been a while. Thank you. With why. Why does it matter that we do family work, right? Why do we care if our children do chores? Sometimes it's easier to do them ourselves, right? Why is it so important? If you have any thoughts about why, go ahead and type them in. Why is it so important that our children learn to contribute to the family, to do family work, to do their jobs, to do chores? Why do we spend so much time, trying to get them to do them? And as you're thinking, I'll kind of go into some of my reasons, and as you type them in, I'll follow up with them. But I think one of the reasons I hear often is that they need to know how, right? So if they leave our home and they go off on their own, if they don't know how to clean a bathroom or do different things, then they're going to be in trouble. And I think that is a valid reason. I also think it's probably the least important one because really, if they need to learn how to clean a toilet, they can YouTube it or they can call. It's not going to be like the end of the world. They can figure out how to do these things. I mean, there will be a learning curve, and they'll have to suffer through it a little bit at the beginning. And if they're married, their husband and wife will have to suffer with them for a little while, but they can learn it, right? But it's nice. It's a nice thing to be able to know before you leave the home. So that's one reason. Another one I've heard is, or I think is really important, also is because it helps them be used to an environment of cleanliness and order. And so if they're always in chaos and things are always messy, then they just kind of get used to that, and that's okay. And so you want them to be more comfortable in order and cleanliness. And like I said, my house isn't always clean, and so I'm not saying that we have to have a perfectly clean house all the time. But if they clean it at least once a day and are making sure that they're doing that, then at least they get used to the fact that it's an important thing and that we do this every day. Let's see, Jamie says important reasons are work ethic, service, and learning to do their part in the community. I think those are awesome, and that's what I wanted to mention as well. If we can remind our children, there's two things, and both of them you mentioned. Besides knowing how to do it and, being more comfortable in a clean environment, if it was easy, then it wouldn't be work, right? And so a lot of times you hear people say, well, we got to find systems that make it so fun that they just want to do it. And we stress ourselves out looking for really fun ways to get our kids to work. And it usually, it can get them through a couple of days or something. But work is, and Mark Twain said, I have his quote here somewhere, work consists of whatever a body is obliged to do, and play consists of whatever a body is not obliged to do, which is an interesting way to put it. But work by very nature isn't always going to be fun, and it's going to be something that we have to make ourselves do sometimes, and that's just a really important thing to know how to do. That's work ethic, like you were saying, Jamie. And so when we teach our children that they need to be disciplined enough to do hard things when they don't want to, that's especially when their character is being built. So it's to build their character, to build them so that they will be able to do hard things when they don't feel like doing them. It's a very important skill and a very important character attribute to be able to have. So that's a very important part of why we teach our children to work. Hi, Callie, you're very good at this, so you don't even need to be watching. I see your kids working all the time. But, they play too. It's not like you're a slave driver. I see them playing too. But yeah, so those things. And then what you said, service. I think that is crucial that our kids understand that. Because if we make it all about them, this is like how important it is for your work ethic, and so you know how to do it, and so that you're successful in life, then work can become a very selfish pursuit, and we don't want our kids to be selfish. But if they understand that family work is a family service, and so it's how we show our family that we love them by contributing to the family. It's how we build our relationships with one another. And it's how we practice those character traits. We could be reading about good people that do great things, but if we're not actually acting on those things, if we don't have the actions connected to them, we're not building character or faith. And so action is very important, and that's what family work is acting in those, learning to get along with our family as we work, learning to do hard things, learning to communicate. All those actions that come with family work are very important life skills. We treat our family work time as a simulation kind of. And so if you've heard of a flight simulation when the astronauts get together and they have a pretend takeoff and they have this pretend space experience so that they can be ready for the real thing, right? And that's what family work is. It's like this mini system of life when we get out into the world, and we need to learn how to get along and how to use those character traits that we're building with one another so that then we can get out and use them with the world. And so that's another really important aspect of family work, is that it's a practice experience for how we will interact with others. If we're really nice to our friends and really mean to our siblings, for instance, we are just being nice because we want to be liked. We're not genuinely nice people yet. And so when we practice that with our own siblings, with our own family, that's when it really becomes part of our character and who we really are. So it's good to teach our kids those principles about why we work. It's not just to get a clean house, although that's good, but it's because of all of these things we're learning as we are working with our family. So I think we covered all of the reasons I had. Contribute to family, character, work ethic, knowledge. I also wanted to mention just the importance of decluttering, because it can be really difficult to have cleanliness when there's too much stuff around. And it if we have a lot of toys and we're constantly having to pick them up, it it's overwhelming, and we're wasting our time always cleaning, right? I mean, I shouldn't say wasting because I just said that it builds character, but it's probably not what we want to be doing all day. And our kids really don't need a lot of toys. It's actually thwarts their imagination to have too many. And so when they're able to use just a few toys and use their imagination to do what what's in their minds, they can play longer and more deeply. And it takes a while, it takes some practice, but they learn better when they don't have a lot of distracting toys around. And so it's okay to get rid of stuff. Don't feel guilty if you're like, you don't need this many things, let's get rid of them. It applies to us as well. I'm trying to get better at decluttering. I still can't get into decluttering my books, but I've gotten better at a lot of other things and trying to get rid of stuff that just takes time and that I don't really need. So that's the other thing I wanted to mention with the principles about family work. And then to get into like the how, the systems and the like some different ways to do it, some ideas. I wanted to mention a couple of things. The first one, well, I think I have 5 here. The first one is that it's not a linear thing. And so a lot of times we'll come up with a system and, that is a good question, Vicki. I'll come back to that. We'll come up with a good system and we're like, oh, this is a perfect system. It's working so well. And then it goes well for a couple of days and then it starts to kind of go down, or people have bad days, or we're having a bad day and it's not looking so good. And we think that the system itself is flawed or we're doing something wrong. And people just have bad days sometimes. So our progress will look a more wavy like this, but it'll be consistently going up because our character is getting built and we'll get better and better as we move on. And so don't get discouraged when things go bad and you think you thought you had something going that was really good and then it's not so good anymore. It's okay to switch things up. It's not about the system. So as I share different ideas, it really doesn't matter what system you do. What matters most is that your kids are learning to serve and help one another, and that you come up with ways to do that and practicing the kindness that goes with that. And that their hearts are there. But I have some kids that love structure and want to have a list and want it to stay the same forever. And I have some kids that really feel tied down when there's too much structure and they just kind of get distracted so easily if we've had the same system for too long. And I'm one of those people. Like, I can't handle the same system all the time, so I change them up all the time. My kids joke about how many systems we've had. But I often change them because we need to work on something different. And so I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But it's okay to change things up and try new things, and don't feel bad. Don't feel like your system's failed. It's just that it's okay. It's okay to change things. So the other thing is that it's good to not reward the job itself, but maybe reward some aspect of how they do it. And so I think it's important for our children to learn duty, and that it's their duty, if they live in a home, to contribute. They don't need to be rewarded or paid for that, right? That's just part of living in a family. But sometimes it's helpful if they're really struggling with a certain aspect. Maybe it's getting it done quickly, or maybe it's getting it done with a good attitude or without putting anybody down. Whatever it is that the family's struggling with, you can think of a way to reward the behavior while they're working instead. So maybe kind of come up with a point system, whereas if for the nice thing you see somebody else doing, you can add a point. We did a family ladder for a while. I was going to talk about that in a minute when I talk about ideas, where you get more points as a family as you see each other pointing out the good things each other's doing. And then when tattletelling or blame happened, we would subtract points from everybody. So that encouraged everybody to be less tattletale or to get in trouble, and everybody to start looking out for the good things that other people were doing. And so that's one way, or like one system that worked for that particular issue that we were having. And so to reward the way it's done I think is fine and good if you feel that's something you want to do, but not to reward the job itself, because that's just their duty and their responsibility. So before I go on, I'm going to answer Vicky's question. She said, how much toys do they actually need? How much is too much? So the rule that we've had at our house, and it sometimes gets broken because we get gifts and things, but is no battery-powered things, because those are entertaining and they do the imagination for them. I read a really good article about a while back, it's like 10 years ago, called Head Gates, and it talked a lot about this. And I think she had like 10 toys for each child. I was never able to get that low, But she talked about how whenever you use any toy that entertains or has a scripted play, it's not as good as if you have like your basic blocks, right, and your basic scarves and basic building materials to make something. So they don't, they need very few in order, depending on the child. Some little kids would prefer, like my little girl loves little calico critters, and she'll play with those for hours, and that's really the only toy she really plays with besides her little doll. And so just a few things I think are good. But you kind of have to start with what you can get rid of, and then a couple weeks later see if you can get rid of more, right? You can't try to get rid of everything at once. For one thing, they'll probably really rebel, and then for another, it's hard. It kind of takes it out of you emotionally sometimes. But so that just start where you can, I would say. But the less you can get is usually better. Okay, so we were at don't reward the chore. So this is kind of what I want to talk about when we're talking about ideas of how to do different things. It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish with your family work system at the time. And it's going to change because you work on different things. So here's some examples of some things we've tried with different ideas. One thing, and I've actually been doing this for at least 12 years, is that we divide our house up into zones. And so they have a stewardship over that area, which is helpful because it teaches them leadership and it teaches them to be responsible for something. So they each have their room and bed that they're responsible for. Well, my 4 boys share a room, and my 3 girls, my 2 girls now because one of them's on a mission, share a room. But they are responsible for taking care of their area. One of them is responsible for making sure the room stays clean. That's his stewardship. And then another one is in charge of the boys' bathroom and making sure that stays clean. Another one is responsible for the living area. And another one is responsible for the toy room. And so anyway, they each have their different stewardships within the home. Our kitchen we divide up differently, but that's the way we do the different areas. And that was to teach them to be good stewards and to learn to communicate well, because if you go up to someone and be like, hey, get your socks off the floor right now, they're not as apt to listen and want to help you as if you're like, hey, you forgot your socks, just reminding you. And so to learn to talk to each other a little more kindly and how to be a better leader. And so that's one idea, is to divide up your home into zones and have each person have an area they're in charge of. Another thing we did once when we were working on honesty and keeping your word, because I felt like a lot of times they say, yeah, I was done with my jobs, and then go check them and I'm like, oh, this isn't really well done. And so actually there's 2 games that kind of came out of that. One of them was for them to learn to look for the details. And so we started this game where I would go in and check, and I'd say, okay, I see 13 things that didn't get done. Let's see if you can find all 13. I didn't point them out, but I wanted them to learn to look for those things that maybe weren't quite finished. So that's one game we did. The other one was more, I remember what it was. Oh, so I had in each room a list of things that needed to be done. And then I have 7 kids that were old enough to do this. And so I had the thing that needed to be done in that room, 7 things that needed to be done. I grouped some of them, and then a little line next to them. And so the first person to go into that room got to write, or to finish something in that room, got to sign their name on it. And that helped them want to be there first, to start doing their jobs more quickly. And it also helped them, I told them, don't sign your name unless you really feel like you've been doing a good job, like you did your very best, because you want to be able to trust yourself, and I want to be able to trust you. And so that was an exercise of honesty and integrity, and being able to keep your word. And again, if it didn't happen, if they signed their name and I looked around, I'm like, you really didn't do your best. In my head, I'm thinking this. Then, it's a good time to talk about how important it is to trust yourself and for others to trust you with your word, and how valuable that is. And maybe, throw in a couple stories to show the point. But that was the one we did when we were working on that integrity and detail, looking for details. Another one, when we were working on family unity, we did the system where, and I really like this one, and I want to go back to this one more often, but we would have like a master list of the upstairs stuff that needed to be done. And so there was quite a few things with little boxes next to them. And I said, okay, I'm going to set the timer for 15 minutes. We're all going to work on this master list as fast as we can, and hopefully we can get it done in 15 minutes. We'll see how our timer goes. And we all work really hard, and everybody gets to pick whatever they initial next to the thing they pick. and everyone works, and when they're done they pick another one. And so it kind of brings this whole, we're all working together, we're not trying to figure out who's supposed to be doing what, and we're working quickly. 15 minutes is not very long, but if we're all working together we can get the whole upstairs clean. And so that was a really nice thing for unity. There were times when someone would be slacking, right? Like everyone's working and somebody's over there playing or teasing. And so usually what I would do is I would take note of how long they were doing that. When I noticed that I was busy working too, so I didn't always know exactly the amount of time, but I would notice, okay, this kid's not working that hard. And then after the 15 minutes were up, I would say, okay, well, it looks like this and this didn't get done because not everybody was working, so we'll let so-and-so finish that up because I noticed he was a little distracted or something like that. So maybe giving them some jobs at the very end of work time to do on their own or things like that, so that also motivated everybody to stay on task and not slack when we were doing our timer. So that's another idea. Another one I have, I mentioned earlier with the ladder game where we're working on not judging one another, not putting each other down. We just started with how when we work, we're going to try to say positive things to each other. So during this time, we'll keep track, and when we finally reach a certain number, then we get to have a family treat or something like that. And so we did that for a while when we're working on not having put downs during that time. And then one that I've been doing lately, which I kind of want to go back to the family unity one a little bit more, but this one I think it's just because I've been it's just been a crazy schedule for everybody lately, right? Like we're all a little bit off, and so we don't have to be anywhere, and I'm okay with him taking a little longer. One of the things that is really important is that I don't allow, well, I should say sometimes it sneaks through, but generally no distraction, no toys, no books, no devices, obviously, nothing that is a privilege until you're finished with your work. And so if they want to go outside and play with friends, I have to say, did you finish your jobs? And if they haven't, then right now they can't really play with friends, but or go outside and play or ride their bike or whatever it is. There's usually something that they want to do, and that's totally off limits, and they know it. They don't usually even ask unless they've done their jobs for the day. And so at those times, and that's kind of how it's been lately, I'll just not say anything until they want to go do something, and then I'll say, oh, well, have you passed off your work? Let me go check it. So that's another way. If you're working on them taking their own initiative or learning how nice it is to get things done early instead of waiting until 2 o'clock to get them done, because then you can't do what you want to do because you're still working at 2 o'clock, then that's another way, is to just, if you don't have to be anywhere, then you can just kind of say, okay, we're working on initiative. Let's see if everybody will do their duty and their jobs without being told and without being nagged, and see how it goes. So that's another system, right? We can set up the systems for what our family needs at the time and the character traits we're trying to build. I started a little book a while back that had like different character traits to build and different ideas for family systems that would help build those character traits. So if there's interest in that, maybe I'll finish that and post it or put it on my website. But I think you can come up, you're getting the idea, right, of coming up with what that looks like. Okay, this is the character trait we need to build, and let's have a family work system right now that helps us work on that particular character trait. Those are some of my ideas. Do you guys have any questions? I'll wait a little bit for questions before I close and do a little recap. I'll look through my notes while I'm waiting to make sure I didn't miss anything. I have a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, the family program that I just finished is really, it's part 1 of a 3-part program. So this one is with the first book. There's going to be 3. But it really focuses a lot on getting our kids' hearts right so that they want to help and contribute, right? If their heart's not right, no matter what system or chart we're using, they're not going to want to do it because they don't have the right motivation. And so that's what kind of the first part of the program is working on their heart, their motivation, understanding that they have an important work to do and that they need to be working towards developing the gifts and talents that they need for that. In our home, there's certain skills that are part of work, and so if they're trying to learn a particular skill like writing or math or violin for one of my sons, that counts as work time. But learning and reading and discovering and researching, that's all like the privilege that comes if you get your jobs done. And so I try not to mix the two, because I don't want them to feel like I have to read in order to get to do what I want to do. I want the learning to be what they want to do and what their privilege. If it feels like a privilege, they're more willing and able to look at it that way. And so I make that difference, and they do. They feel like reading is a privilege, and they look forward to it instead of as a chore. And so unless, like my daughter who was learning to read, that was part of her skills, is learning to read. But then once it became something that it's almost there that she can do fluently, then it becomes more something that you get to do, because you need to work on other skills as part of your work. So what was I saying? Oh yeah, so the family program works on that, their heart, so that they want to do and develop their unique gifts and talents. And then part 2 will focus on arming them so that they have the energy and the power to be able to do it. And then part 3 goes more into this stuff, like more into the how do we make our environment align with those goals, and how do we make our body, like I call it the weapon of our spirit. How do we align our actions and how we take care of our body to align with those goals? And so it goes more into that. But if it's having your kids want to help and contribute is one of the hard things that's been hard for you, then I do recommend trying that. It's right now on pre-sale price or pre-launch price, so it's really affordable for everybody. But I don't see any more questions, and so I'll just recap real quick, and then we can close unless I see any after I'm done with the recap. But basically, why do we work? Because it builds character. It helps them learn to do hard things when they don't feel like doing them, even if they're not part of what sounds fun. It builds our characters. Oh, this is nothing I wanted to mention. Our character is eternal, right? And so sometimes it feels like jobs are so temporary. I make my bed and then it's messy again. I clean the dishes and they're messy again 2 hours later. It's such a waste of time. But when our kids understand that it's eternal, that our work is, that our character is something that we're building each time we do a dish and each time we do something we don't necessarily feel like doing, then it's a lot easier to realize, like, oh, then it's not a waste of time, or it's not just something trivial. It's something that's really important in the long run. Actions build character, not just reading about good deeds, but actually doing them with our family. No privilege until the work is done, because learning is a privilege. It's not a right or an obligation. And that work ethic was the other reason. It builds discipline. That they have the knowledge, the know-how when they're older, that they get more used to cleanliness and order, and then want to enjoy the process of bringing order. That's also something that brings us a lot of joy. When we can contribute to that, it's a godlike characteristic to bring order to something. And so we can start to feel the joy that comes when we do that, and that's something important for us to start to experience and feel. And it's the way that we contribute to our family. It shows them that we love them. It shows them that we care about their environment, and it helps us serve and love one another. And then I mentioned that our progress isn't linear, that it's okay that we have bad days and that we steadily work, character improves and we get better. I also mentioned that it's not about the system. It's okay to change things up. And I also mentioned that we don't reward the chore, but we maybe reward an aspect of how it's getting done, timeliness or attitude. There is no perfect system for everyone, but you can look at your family and what they might need, and then and then build a system according to the character trait you're working on right now. Then it's okay to change it. Then I mentioned some systems, and then that was it. I asked for questions. So see, there's one right here from Vicky. She says, so when they're learning something, that's not a privilege until they get the hang of it. Yeah, for us it's, I I wouldn't say necessarily learning something, because maybe they want to learn about whales and that's something that's really interesting to them. I would still call that a privilege, because we would call that part of their learning time, right? Part of what they get to do and research later. But if it's a skill, like a basic skill, like math or learning to read or learning to write, then those kind of things I label more as work, because they're not fun yet. Nobody enjoys learning to read. It's not until after you read. No one enjoys learning math. It's not until you're good at it that you can see the enjoyment in it. So those things that are really nitty-gritty hard, I don't expect my kids to just be like, I want to do this. I mean, sometimes they have when they're older and they're like, oh, I'm kind of behind in math, I got to catch up, and then they do. But a lot of times, I've been trying to do this more with my younger kids, is you just put a little bit of effort into each of these things each day, then you see big results in the long run. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Okay, well, I always feel like it went so short, but that was 30 minutes, so that's what I said I would do. If you have other questions that come up as you're watching this, or if you're watching the replay, feel free to type them in, and I'll just type in my response, or if it's something that I want to talk more about, I'll do another live about it. I have one more that people ask questions about, but I'm happy to continue and keep doing these on Tuesdays if I get more questions. So if you have other questions about parenting or things like that, then please, or even just things you want to discuss, go ahead and type them in and we'll do some more of these. Thanks for listening, and we will see you later.